the U.S. Senate, challenging Claire McCaskill in 2018. Austin, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so what we're going to do is we have full creative freedom of the podcast now. We're not in association with Students for Liberty, so we can talk to Austin about whatever we want, including his campaign.
Pure anarchy.
So we're going to go over Austin's campaign. And Austin, could you first explain why the GOP and not the LP?
Good question. So the first answer I would give you, and there's a lot of reasons, is that I spent about 2 months on the phones calling my supporters personally, directly, and I asked them all the same questions. I said, should I run? 100% said yes. The second question I asked is, which party should I run under? And 98% or more said run as a Republican because they want to get Claire McCaskill gone as much as I do. And there's lots of other reasons. Another one was that we looked at the numbers and we pretty much, if I had run as Libertarian, I would have guaranteed Claire McCaskill for probably another 6 years. And I don't think that that's in the best interests of my fellow Missourians. It's definitely not in the best interests of the citizens of my country. So, you know, if I fight and I win, and great, I'll be doing my country a favor. But if I fight and I lose, then I'll still be doing my country a favor because I won't be guaranteeing them another 6 years of a progressive Democrat.
Yes. Yusuf, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, what do you think are the biggest clarifying differences between you and Senator McCaskill?
Probably fiscal conservatism would be a big one, right? So I saw today that there was a vote for socialized medicine. She voted present rather than to get herself on the record on that. She was one of the key architects of Obamacare, right, which is something that I definitely want to get in there and try and repeal. She voted against Neil Gorsuch, the Supreme Court Justice, who was very popular in Missouri. She was one of the first endorsers of Hillary Clinton. In 2013, she endorsed her, the very first person on Capitol Hill to endorse Hillary Clinton. So all of those things, including the issues where she's out of step with her own party, like criminal justice reform, getting rid of mandatory minimums, returning to the original intent of the Constitution as the Founding Fathers envisioned, where judges set the terms of sentences for the criminals. Because what's funny is Claire McCaskill, they all live in these gated communities, these legislators, they never come into contact with these criminals, and then they proceed to tell the judges, we don't trust you, we'll decide how much of a sentence you will give to these. It contributes to the tension between the communities and the inner cities and the police. And so Claire McCaskill is not only out of step with the regular Missouri voter, she's also out of step with her own party.
All right, and this is what I admire about you, and this is where Yusuf and I will probably disagree. But what I look for in candidates is intellectual honesty and humility. And when you ran for president for the LP, you were very intellectually honest, and you were willing to talk to your supporters and discuss ideas with them. And you were very open-minded, and you weren't coming out. Gary Johnson was like this too. You didn't take positions that were like, I want to get into president, and I believe this so strongly that I want to put it into law, and it's going to be the law of the land. You are a person that is willing to talk to people and influence and create legislation or types of things that is compromisable. Is that fair to say?
Sure, I would say so. I mean, one of the reasons why I got beat up by some of the hardcore libertarians last year is that my spending cut plan was 1%. They're like, how dare you propose 1%? I'm like, well, we can't even get cuts in planned growth. I'm asking for a 1% spending cut, right? You got to start somewhere. 1%. I mean, sure, I'd love to slash it, Ron Swanson, the whole thing. But I mean, I think that getting ourselves in the right direction is the right step to go. I mean, just proposing the first step forward is so radical right now that, I mean, in that sense, it makes me a radical. My personal beliefs are one thing, but I also understand that the American citizens are used to a form of government such as the one that we have right now. And I don't think it's wise to just rip the carpet out from underneath their feet. I think that you have to explain why we need more policies. So that's why I do that. So that policy, the penny plan, right? One penny out of every federal dollar. That's a reasonable, pragmatic step towards what we really want to get to, which is a world where taxation is theft.
Yes, right. And that I'm personally a pragmatist. I call myself a pragmatic, moderate libertarian, which Yusuf pointed out to me is basically just classical liberalism.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm overcomplicating it, but. Yusuf, would you agree with that? Pragmatic approaches?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I wouldn't really agree that we differ on the issue of intellectual honesty and humility. And one thing I also really appreciated about you was your speaking skills, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that we need more in the liberty movement.
Mm-hmm.
I want to move things a little bit towards the weeds of the campaign just a little bit. So how do you think that you can differentiate yourself from the other Republicans? Because this is something that I think is really important for liberty-minded individuals to understand, even though I not agree with anyone 100% except ourselves, that there are significant differences between establishment Republican types and perhaps someone like yourself.
Well, I mean, it's going to be fairly obvious soon because I do say I'm a different kind of Republican.
Right.
And when I think of republicanism, when you're talking about a philosophy, it's a different thing as a party, right? I believe in a constitutional republic, small c, small r, right? So in some sense, I'm more Republican than Republicans. And because I know what that means, that word, what a republic is. When I say I want to restore the republic, I'm talking about the philosophy of a Republican form of government. But it will be very obvious once the more establishment challengers get into the race, and when we have people who are jumping into the race because they're going to put up traditional moderate type conservatives or more traditional conservatives, that I will be standing out on issues like criminal justice reform, a big issue, right? I will be calling for a total end to the federal war on drugs, and I will be advocating for probably even a more hardcore position on gun control. I'm going to advocate for abolishing the National Firearms Act, for goodness sakes. I mean, even the conservatives are kind of like, well, so it won't be that hard to differentiate myself. I probably will be the only candidate who said that, banning transgender people in the military is a bad idea, right? I guess it's a mistake to attack people who honorably serve our country. I might be the only person running who will actually take that position because it's just so politically unpopular to stand up for people who have no ability to stand up for themselves. But you know what? I hate bullies, and I've always despised bullies. I've always stood up for the people who got picked on in class. As a matter of fact, when I was in elementary school, there was a girl who would always get picked on in class. And one day she was on the monkey bars, and I was encouraging her. I was like, you can do this. You can go. Great, go. Teaching her how to do it. And she finally learned how to do it because she just needed the confidence. And I didn't know anybody was watching, but I got a note the next day from the principal who said, Austin, we heard what you did. That is what we want at our school. You are an all-star student. Thank you so much. And I was like, okay, great. This is good. I want to stick up for people who can't stick up for themselves. And I think we need more of that in society because we have authoritarianism everywhere in the state. That's because they think, well, of course it's perfectly fine for me to justify using the government to force my morality down your throat. And I like to say that, we don't have to agree on these values. We don't have to agree on these virtues. We just have to say that we can have these values, we can have these virtues, but we're not going to use the government to legislate them and force them down your throat. And because I think the culture wars have gone towards, unfortunately, in some ways, the social justice warriors on the left, is that we're starting to talk about things like getting the government out of marriage, right? And after the Obergefell decision, so it's a complicated bag. It's difficult for me in a primary, of course, to win those, right? Because they're going to be like, well, you're a libertarian as a Republican, and you're just trying to win. And I'm like, well, you've had 100 years of progressive Republicans. You can survive 6 years of a libertarian Republican.
All right, fair. And that actually leads us into another question that we thought about asking you, which is regarding morality. Should morality be dictated by law? And should it be illegal?
Morality should be dictated by law because it's immoral to kill people, right? It's immoral to kill babies, right? It's immoral to commit crime. So in that sense, you are legislating morality. What I'm talking about is, narrow definitions of morality that are not universally, accepted necessarily. But that just because something's popular doesn't mean it's always right? Like in some cultures, Sharia law is the popular law of the land, and you can beat your wife, and that's obviously against libertarian principles. So it has to be understood definitionally. The way that we determine morality, at least in my position, some people determine it from a higher power, and I respect that. But the way that I determine morality is through the process of triangulation, and I use data points in order to determine the right place. It's sort of like aviation in some sense. If you're heading towards something, you use data points. You're using navigation like a star, right? Using multiple stars in order to determine that you're heading in the right direction. So you're not necessarily heading towards true north always, but you're heading in the general right direction.
So use astrology.
It's astronomy, right? So the difference, big difference. I'm not reading the star charts. I'm using the actual stars to navigate. So because I think it's a little difficult, because morality, what is moral has changed over time, right? In some governments, in some places, human sacrifice was totally moral and fine, and that is how government operated. But we have developed new forms of morality as new religions have sprung up with new ethical systems and new secular moral systems. So we've had a mix of the two, right? And so how we get there, in my opinion, is through the process of triangulation. So yes, we should enforce morality through the government as a limited government person, right? We're enforcing life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. If government is to exist, then that is the role of what it is to defend. So yes, in some sense, we are legislating morality. It's just that sometimes we don't want to enforce Sharia morality, right?
Yes.
We don't want to enforce, the Tao Te Ching's morality, right? We want to have the sort of the Western traditions, the classical liberal traditions that we agree with.
So I guess the question is then, where do you draw the line? Because there are a lot of people who would feel that doing drugs is immoral.
Sure.
And then the common response is, well, you may feel very strongly that it is immoral, but that does not necessarily mean that it should be illegal.
Yeah.
But the question is, well, we believe murder is immoral,
right,
and we believe murder should be illegal.
Right.
And there might be some groups of people who believe just as strongly that that drugs are immoral, that as they do that beating your wife is moral, right? So the question is, I guess, where and how do we draw that line?
Well, remember, there's self-harm and then there's harm to others.
Right.
There's really not a whole lot that the government can do to save us from ourselves. There are things that the government can do to save us from each other, and to have a police force that's there to protect us from one another. But when it comes to drug use, I mean, the truth is everybody uses drugs.
Right.
Everybody has a preferred drug, whether it's nicotine or whether it's alcohol. We have caffeine, right? And Mormons don't use caffeine; they don't drink coffee, and of course, again, what is the question is, who's harmed, who is harmed, and I think that's the way to determine the morality of the situation, because again, if you're using heroin, for example, and it may not be harming anyone else, but what if you have children? Right. So you are harming someone else in a sense. You are harming someone else. So in that sense, it's much more of a gray area. But everybody likes to have fixed.
Yes.
Right. We have like a fixed principles. The truth is that it's just much more difficult sometimes to nail down the morality on these things, and it's going to have to be determinate. I would actually side with Mr. David Friedman, who I debated this morning, who said that in some ways you're going to have a system of laws that will naturally, spontaneously emerge, and he said some of those laws might be anti-libertarian, which is why I'm like, well, screw that. I'm a statist. Like, make the laws libertarian, but again, there are no easy answers to these questions. Now, I'm a truth seeker.
Yes.
Right? I'm the type of person who wants to find out what the truth is, and when I find the truth, I'll share with others. But I don't have all the answers. It's one of the reasons why I don't want to run your life. I don't want to tell you what to do with your life, because I don't know everything, right? And so again, it's going to have to be a little. You got to have a little bit of lackadaisical. I know so many cops who say we had so many people who had marijuana, and we would just let them go. Because they just knew there was a waste of time. Now they have body cams, which we probably appreciate, right? But now because of the body cams, they can't do that. So they don't have any discretion on whether or not to bust someone. It may be illegal, but they knew that it was immoral to bust these people with that drug. So gray areas can be useful sometimes because people can use their best judgment. And if you don't trust people, well, then you're going to have a body cam on them all the time. Why not have body cams on everybody all the time in our bedrooms, watching us? Or do we need some gray areas? Well, I think we need a little bit of liberty, a little bit of relaxation on these things. Sorry, guys, but I'm just not an authoritarian.
And I think that's really where humility comes in, because a lot of people say, I am the pure libertarian, or I am the purest one of them all. And I think in a sense, you can also argue that anarchy is a bit like that, where if you say I'm an anarchist, you're kind of suggesting that what would be best.
Sure.
That like
don't force the
Kerner argument, who argued against Jeffrey Tucker, that because we need to have humility, we do not know the truth. We cannot presume that to say anarchy would be the best system. But all that we do know is that less government.
Well, remember, everybody wants to leave something to their posterity, and government creates an enforceable way to do that through enforcing property rights. So, in some sense, right, if you want a stable system for your children, right, that's why the founding fathers did what they did when they wrote the Constitution. They were like, we want to leave the fruits of liberty, of the blessings of the security to our children and to our posterity, right? They want to plant a tree so that one day their children can climb and swing in it, right? That's what they were doing in some sense, right? The three branches of government, and so that's really the thinking on that for the minarchist argument is to create a stable system so that you're not having a roiling anarchy every 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right?
Sure. And let's get into that debate that you had with David Friedman.
Yeah.
How did you think you did? And do you have any comments on his very last thought there about you not knowing what would happen under a minarchist system?
Yes, I wish I could. I actually had a rebuttal ready to go, because he sort of painted a straw man by arguing that the current system as it is was the one that I was advocating for, in a sense, and that's not true, because I actually want a minarchist government that's different than the one that we have right now, much smaller than the one we have right now. In some sense, he was painting a straw man by saying, he's like, and look at the government that you have right now. I'm like, well, this is not the minarchist government that I want. So yeah, I disagree with it. I wish I'd gotten a chance to rebut him on that.
Well, to be fair, he did not say that the government that we have now is what you want. He's saying you can't be sure that the system you want is going to lead to what you think it's going to.
Well, no, but I said that the truth was that I said that I knew that it wasn't, because the natural tendency, I agreed, natural tendency of expand and liberty to shrink. So my understanding is that eventually, one day, we're going to have to hit the reset button through natural processes, through the collapse of the system such as it is, or through a revolution which will occur. That is the thing is that people, you have got to look at things in the whole expanse of society. And even Friedman admitted that the anarchist experiments that we had all fallen apart. There are no modern experiments in anarchy, and the closest to the modern experiment in minarchy would be the United States, and we've seen how that has gone. But the thing is that when he says, of course, government will grow, well, the anarchist private government, minarchists argue, will grow. It will eventually become a monopoly government, because if the private government ever seeks to stop a private enforcement agency from another government from enforcing law within its territory, then it is acting as a monopoly government. It is stopping the enforcement of those competing laws in its territory. Therefore, it is violating the non-aggression principle in such a way.
I'm going to get your thoughts on this. I'm going to say what you just said. I'm just going to explain it in a way that I think Friedman would have understood better.
Okay, sure.
Let's see if I can do that.
Okay, go ahead.
Government is spontaneous order. That's essentially what you're saying, correct?
Well, it will arise spontaneously, right, from a collection of individuals.
So I guess the point would be anarchy has never existed. Why has anarchy never existed? Because government is a spontaneous order. It's going to occur regardless.
Right.
So I guess that would be, I think Friedman was misunderstanding what you were saying. Again, he was creating straw mans.
Friedman argued that the instances of anarchy that we have seen were longer than the instances of minarchy that we have seen. So I think he argued that like medieval Iceland was
Icelandic Gedord, the hoplite farmers of ancient Greece, and Ziers.
Bill, I told you this. Steve Jobs.
Right.
When he first came out with the Apple iPod, there was a shuffle feature that wasn't working correctly because people said it wasn't random enough. They didn't know what the word random meant, because 10 songs appearing 10 times in a row is completely random. So what they did is they created an algorithm, and Steve Jobs said, we're making the iPod less random. That's essentially the idea of minarchy, is you're creating a system that is stabilizing freedom. So you're making it less free to make it feel more free.
Right. Mises wrote a book called Planned Chaos, and the idea, and Hayek sort of articulated the idea that it's not that there's no plan, it's that there's more planners, right? We want decentralized plans, in essence, right? It's not that it is really total anarchy, it's that everybody is planning for themselves and their lives and their communities and all that stuff.
One thing that I want to ask is a point that a lot of people bring up when we're talking about minarchy is often said, like you said, the United States was an example of minarchy for a certain period of time. And what a lot of people point out, particularly on the left, particularly progressives, is that it may be a problem to kind of fetishize that time period as it was a period where women could not vote, no one who did not have land could vote, where there was slavery. And I was having many conversations about this today. Like, was the United States really can you call it a minarchy?
Yes, but they're hypocrites, because then they're going to fetishize the time that Che Guevara murdered a bunch of homosexuals and burned books. And
suppose it's not them. Suppose it's not them, right? Suppose it's not the leftists who would support Che Guevara. Suppose they are consistent on this issue. Do you see why some people might find that to be problematic?
It depends, right? It depends. Like, so some people may be from a special interest group, right? And they may say that, okay, my people were not represented at this time, right? And so they may say that, okay. The problem, of course, is that at the time, the understanding during the Declaration of Independence was the promise of freedom that would come. They would never have had the opportunity to have freedom in the future if the compromise had been made at the Declaration of Independence. In many ways, they're acting like anarchists and saying, we must have it now, we must have it today, but the opportunity wasn't there. Because, for example, the southern states would have refused to have signed the pact to bring together the northern states into the alliance that was necessary to defeat the British Army. So in some ways, it was a deal with the devil, and they said, because they tried to get rid of slavery at the Declaration of Independence, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. That's what Jefferson wanted. He wanted them to do that, and they wouldn't do it. So the question was, would we be able to free the slaves today? The answer was no. They would not have been able to have the power to do it. But sown into the seeds of the Constitution was the future freedom of the slaves. And eventually, the southern states seceded from that form of government, and because the federal government was required to place a Republican form of government in every state, and because the states expressly seceded for the purpose of maintaining chattel slavery, there is nothing more libertarian than putting down and destroying, crushing a slaveholding government. And so in such a way, freedom was won in the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, the most libertarian amendments of them all, save perhaps the Second Amendment, were born. And so, again, if you're a slave and you're in the basement and you're being held hostage, you're not going to want to either. I totally understand. But when when you look at things through contextual history, you have to understand the players in the game and what was at stake in order to understand why contextually they were not able to have their freedom immediately. But that the people who were there, the good people were there, they were agitating, the abolitionist movements were there, they were pushing. And so, I don't think it's a wrong thing to fetishize. I think that the seeds of freedom, of everyone's freedom, the freedom of gays to marry was sown during that signing of that Constitution. It was there.
Amendment, really.
Yes, and the 14th Amendment, right? And so so I would say that no, it's not wrong to fetishize it.
The
14th is the most important one. The 14th is one of the most important, most libertarian amendments, privileges and immunities and such. But I don't have a whole lot more time.
Yeah, no problem.
So what do we? You wanted to add? Didn't you want to say there's a lot of things people don't like about me?
We'll go to the things they don't like about
Okay, tell me why people hate me.
From the Republican side, it's going to be the war on drugs. That's you're going to have a problem. I'm sure you're very prepared for that. And then from the libertarian side, you're going to isolate about 50% on the pro-life issue, which I'm sure you'll be able to rebuttal to. But do you want a chance to make those rebuttals?
Well, it's nice that you should bring up something based on policy rather than just like, Austin, you're a jerk. But there are far more pro-life people than there are libertarians, probably by an order of magnitude. So from a pure tactical perspective, you can't say, well, you're going to lose your libertarian base because you're being pro-life. Because one, I'm doing it on a matter of principle. And I think more libertarians should be pro-life. And two, from a matter of tactical thing, it's no great loss. That's just a pure tactical argument, not a principled one. I don't want to lose friends, but the simple fact of the matter is that, again, you have to understand that being pro-life is a very important thing personally to me, and it's a very important thing professionally as well. It's become, I didn't even realize it was going to become an issue until I realized I was the only pro-life libertarian running for president last year. When I got in the debates, I was like, oh my God, well, this is actually an advantage here.
Here's where the issue resides.
Okay.
There's two moral conflicts within is the sanctity of a life, and there is private property. And if this would help you understand their position.
I understand what they claim. They dehumanize the child by claiming the child itself is not private property.
However, would you make the argument that the woman has the right to remove the child and have an adoption.
I mean, that would obviously be superior to killing the child, right?
Yes.
You're talking about what's that?
Evictionism.
Evictionism, right?
Eviction.
So that would obviously be superior to killing the child, sure. But I mean, don't you have a right to be personally responsible? What the hell, libertarians? You know, we talk a big game about personal responsibility until it comes to this issue, and then the most politically incorrect thing that anybody can say is that somebody ought to be personally responsible beforehand, because we have plenty of options to stop pregnancies. But what was the second issue? Because I don't have a whole lot of time.
The war on drugs is the second issue.
You know, it's a constitutional issue. The federal government had no constitutional authority. They had to get a constitutional amendment to ban alcohol. So it's a conservative issue in that regards. Mandatory minimums. Again, thank you. So that's how I'll approach it, the conservatives. And remember, guys, don't forget, elections don't have to be won on majorities. I don't have to have 50%. Some people are just got to have 200,000 votes. Some people are not going to like me. But you can't please everyone, and you shouldn't try. You just need a keen, irate minority.
And before you go, I have one question for you, real quick. It's a yes or no question.
Okay.
Edward Snowden, okay?
Okay.
If you were to become governor or in the Senate or House of Representatives, wherever you go, and you find out information that is unconstitutional, would you reveal it to the public?
The question, I think, would be, if I thought it would get people killed, I don't think so. If I thought that I was going to put people's lives in danger, I would probably find a productive way to ensure that we would regain the constitutional liberties. Because what happens is you're dealing with agents in foreign countries, and many times very irresponsibly, some of these leakers are putting out information of people who are patriots, who are sincerely committed to protecting our American national security. And under no circumstances am I going to endanger the national security of the American people. However, if I were to find such an unconstitutional program, it may not be that I go and I reveal it, but in a secret meeting, I constitutional liberties. That is very important to me. I think that the balance should be on liberty. And if under any other circumstances, right, I would be more than happy to blare it out, right? But I am taking responsibility as a representative to the citizens of the United States. And the last thing that I would ever want to do is give a flag to irresponsible behaviors. That I can do to our citizens and their pursuit of happiness, and it looks like we're losing.
Well, that's a very fair answer to a very tough question.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. Yeah. Bye, guys.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you.